I think there's a complete lack of awareness of the rules and how they're implemented. Nobody can be expected to go and, kind of read the FCA handbook, which if you printed it out would, probably stretch, at least 6 foot in the air. There's a lot of people pushing stuff out there, for a lot of people to see, not really understanding the repercussions of what they might say or do. I mean, the FCA haven't recently decided to prosecute, I think it's about 9, they call them finfluencers, Geordie Shore cast members, for paid promotion on their social media platforms. That is a totally new world that would not have existed a decade ago.
Welcome to this episode of the Property Funding Podcast, the podcast where we have tips and learnings for property developers and landlords, particularly around the area of funding, helping them save time and money. Delighted today to be joined by someone I've known for a number of years now, Mr. Angus Griffin. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having us, David.
Absolutely delighted to have you on today. I know I've tried getting you on a few times. You're a busy man. The diary was full, but we've managed to make it happen today, and I'm really looking forward to the next hour or so that we spend together.
You make me sound far more important than I actually am, so I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, I would say you're very, very important. You're a man certainly in demand when it comes to speaking engagements and podcasts and things like that. So I say glad to have you here. And I think we met. I think I'm right in saying our first time ever meeting in person was at the event run by a mutual friend, Mr. John Corey. Would that be correct?
That's right. It would have been the London Real Estate Meet back pre-COVID, probably.
It must have been, yeah. So we're in about 6 years? Would that be about right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you were the guest speaker that night, as I recall. And I'd been going to John's events probably for 2 or 3 years at that point. And when did you first meet John? How did that introduction come about?
Interesting question. I must have met John around about maybe 2017 time. I think John had reached out to me because although I was investing in property at the time and had been for a while, I was also working at the Financial Conduct Authority because my background is in financial services litigation. And as you know, John's passion's about, kind of compliance around property deals.
There's an understatement if ever there was one.
Oh yeah, maybe obsession. Maybe obsession is the right word. So, and I think that's how we connected.
Okay, very good. I can just imagine that. He's probably seen you flash up somewhere, compliance, FCA, property. I can just see him. There's a man I have to speak to. But he ran a brilliant event. In some ways, it's kind of sad that post-COVID, he's obviously stayed in America, but we've kind of lost that event on the property circuit because I think he ran a very unique event, the way he hosted it and the sort of speakers he had at it.
Yeah, I think those, since COVID especially, those independent, kind of central London meets, which attracted a really kind of active, sophisticated crowd. We've lost a few of them, and and it's a poorer property network and circuit for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we'll certainly be digging into the FCA part of your life and how that now bumps into the world of property investment as we go along. But just initially, I have to ask this, obviously, if you're from Sunderland area, I'm assuming you're into football, and I'm assuming you support one of the big teams up there?
I do. I'm a Sunderland supporter. Have been for a long time. Had to give up my season ticket when I moved to London. But still try and get to as many matches as I can. I tell my sister, who's my business partner, that I'm coming up to the northeast to look at properties. But it does happen to coincide quite often with the Sunderland home game.
With big games, yeah. Who's the manager there at the minute?
Regis Labrise.
Ah, yes, okay, very good. So, and you had a couple of players from Northern Ireland at the time. Whenever Roy Keane was managed and you got promotion, you had Johnny Evans.
Yeah, David Healy. We've had a number of.
That's right, David Healy as well. Yes, I see him regularly at the minute because he manages Linfield, and I'm the general manager of Loughgall Football Club.
Okay,
so we play each other 3 or 4 times a year. So I see David quite regularly.
Oh, there we go.
I forgot he was actually at Sunderland.
Yeah.
Did he score many goals for you?
Not as many as he did for other clubs, which is a source of disappointment. You can tell him next time you see him.
And not as many as he should have. Full stop.
Quite right.
I'll definitely pass that on to him. So when I said there was 2 big teams in Newcastle, what I meant was there was Newcastle first team and Newcastle reserves.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking Sunderland there, but you mentioned Sunderland.
This is going to be the shortest podcast in the world if you carry on like that.
I couldn't resist that. I think that's a famous Liverpool story from Bill Shankly or something. But anyway, we'll move on from football. Otherwise, I will be here all day, and so will you. We'll enjoy our football. So we'll have to go and watch a game together sometime.
Sounds good.
You can host me at Sunderland.
Bring your coat.
Yeah, and then you come across to Loughgall. So first thing we do is a bit of a, just to get to know you, relax a wee bit, what we call a quick fire round. Okay. So these are one-word answers. And just lets the listeners and the watchers understand a bit more who is Angus Griffin. Okay? So, favourite food?
Pizza.
Oh, okay. Favourite film?
The Green Mile.
Why that one?
I don't know. I think it's got a bit of everything. I think it takes you on a bit of an emotional roller coaster. It was a toss-up between that and the Shawshank Redemption, so maybe I'm slightly prison-obsessed. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, given your background, which we'll come on to it for a little bit, maybe putting people who misbehave from the FCA point of view, maybe that's where they end up. So maybe there's a reason for that. Okay. Favourite country?
St. Lucia.
Any particular reason?
I think I spent a lot of time there on holiday. I like the lifestyle. I like the people. I like the culture. For me, as a very active outdoor person, I like the fact that you can do a lot of activities, and I just feel I feel at home there. We've got a holiday home out in a very weird kind of location out in Bulgaria, and although it would be no one's choice of holiday destination because it is a bit cheap and cheerful if you watched any of the Channel 4 documentaries. I also feel incredibly relaxed there, so probably weirdly, that would come close second.
Yeah, okay. I have a few friends in Northern Ireland invested in holiday homes out in Bulgaria along Sunny Beach.
Yeah, so ours is in a little village about 2 miles further down the coast from Sunny Beach.
Oh, okay. From memory, there was like there was like Sunny Beach, then there was like an older part. Was the old town, old city it was referred to or something?
Yeah, so you've got a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is the town of Nessebar, which is just further along the coast.
Yes, okay.
And then we've got a place in a little village called St. Blas, which is just outside of Sunny Beach, on the other side of the city.
Okay, and do you go there like most years, a couple of times a year?
Yeah, usually if I can, 2-3 times a year, just to relax, just to switch off a bit. I like going on holiday to a place actually where you know it, and I tend to find that means you can switch off a lot quicker, so you get a lot more out of your holiday.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. Favorite sport?
Football.
That's an easy one. Sometimes it's then favourite team sport, but that really answers both of those, and we've already covered Sunderland, so we've got that out of the way already. We don't have to go back and revisit that one again.
I say it's favourite, but watching Sunderland still makes me miserable. As anyone who ever watched like Sunderland Till I Die, the Netflix documentary, or anything would know.
I saw some of it, yeah. but sure, we love it. We love our clubs. Win, lose or draw, we're supporters. That's the true supporter. Yeah. To be fair.
Yeah.
Half the Man City supporters aren't really Man City. Let's be honest, not really Man City supporters.
Yeah, I used to watch a lot of Arsenal, and what I found was, someone would try and hit a 40-yard diagonal pass, and it would be, I don't know, a foot too far, and the crowd would be like, oh, and I'd be like, look, if someone can pass 6 foot at Sunderland to their team, they get a round of applause. You don't realise how good you are.
That's a fair point, actually. Expectations are an amazing thing in football, But again, I better not get into that. We'll maybe come back and do a podcast just on Sunderland and Loughgall Football Club.
Okay, that'll be very niche. I'm not sure how many people would be interested in that, mind you.
Well, that's true too. Well, you have a few more fans than we have. I can assure you of that. Okay, now the controversial ones. Okay. Apple or Android?
Apple.
You're like John Corey on that. We used to have some discussions around that. Definitely an Android man. So now this is the big one. This is the big dividing line on the Property Funding Podcast. Marmite?
No.
Like it or hate it?
No.
Definitely not.
Definitely not.
I think that's the bigger group, to be fair. I don't mind. I could take it, but I wouldn't choose it.
Yeah.
But
I just can't get my head around it. The flavour. It's like pineapple on pizza,
It just doesn't work.
There's some things you don't do in life. Do you know what I mean? So.
Well, do you ever drink Bovril? Surely they'd have that in Sunderland matches and all.
I have occasionally had a Bovril, but it's just like drinking a cup of gravy.
To be fair, you're not wrong. So, okay, that's a definite. Okay, dream car.
Do you know what? That's hard for me to say. I'm not much of a car person, I'll be honest with you. Maybe something like an Aston Martin DB9. looks very nice, but I think I'm just boring. Like a car for me is functional, takes me from A to B. You know, and I don't think I would ever buy a ridiculously expensive car unless I had so much money I didn't know what to do with it.
You needed something to write off on tax.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a problem. No problem. Favorite property type. So is there like maybe a holiday home, maybe your strategy, whatever it is, just a property type.
In terms of strategy or in terms of...
Anything. It could be a holiday home that you like, or it could be just the fact that you do a certain sector. Is it commercial? Is it buy-to-lets? Is it mixed use? Whatever it is that sort of is a favourite.
So my favourite strategy, I'll answer this in 2 ways. My favourite strategy is buy-to-let.
Okay.
My favourite property that I own is we own a 500-year-old Grade 2 listed tea and coffee warehouse that's been converted into 2 commercials and 4 service departments. And that is a beautiful building. Okay. So in terms of looks, that's my favourite.
Okay. So last one. If you could own a property anywhere in the world, any location in the world, what would it be?
I would probably say St. Lucia. Because I like going there. And for all the reasons we've already talked about. As long as logistic, I could get there often enough. So you might have to have a word with my wife if you're offering that up. But
at that point, you have the private jet, so you just
good point.
You just load up and go whenever you want. Like.
Fine, okay. You still need. I mean, wife still might get annoyed if I disappear for 6 months of the year. So you might just have to clear that with her first.
Yeah,
so.
I was thinking putting your wife on the plane as well with you. That's what I was thinking. But
I should put that bit out.
Yeah, I think we're getting too deep now into the whatever might happen in the future. There we are. So moving on then, just to a bit of like I say early life. It's just is there anything like where were you born? Anything stand out in early life? School? Anything particular happen?
Do you know? I think I was incredibly fortunate as a child, very privileged. I had a very happy upbringing. I was born in South Shields, up in the northeast of England. Lived a very kind of privileged lifestyle. We never really, I wouldn't say we were rich, but we never really wanted for anything. I was given a fantastic education. My dad worked really hard. That allowed me, my sister to go to private school, which we were very fortunate to do. So I would say in early life, no. Early life was absolutely fantastic. I think obviously probably when we got to me in my early 20s, it kind of got a bit more challenging from that perspective. But in terms of early life, it was very happy.
Okay, good. So when did you buy your first property? What age were you?
2005. So I would have been 23, 24, something like that.
That's young to purchase your first property.
Well, I think we had my dad had an interest in property, and I'd finished university. My sister was at university, and I think there was I was already moving to London to start my kind of legal training contract. My sister was planning to follow, kind of doing what she did. She didn't in the end, and his advice was we kind of worked when we were at school and stuff like that to club together and to buy an investment property, which potentially, we might want to live in the future. So we ended up buying a flat in Hertfordshire at the time on the commuter line to London. Terrible purchase, thinking that we might eventually live there because none of us have ever lived there. Right. But great purchase for a whole load of other reasons. So that's really how we got started.
Yeah, okay. And so that was sort of at university, beginning to study law, and bought your first property.
So I just finished my studies and was just about to start my training contract in central London. At one of the Magic Circle law firms. My sister at the time was just starting university, I think.
Okay, and that's quite cool. You're saying your father had an interest in property,
yeah,
and then you kind of did it together. Father and children got together to kind of go for that first.
No, so we did under his guidance. I think he was kind of a keen amateur landlord, and my sister and I remember being dragged around various. Kind of properties in various states of disrepair when we were younger, get dragged to Woolworths or Argos to buy something, to put in a property or something like that. So I think that's where it came from. He encouraged us to do that. At the time, we'll be honest, it wasn't top of our priority list. We didn't really understand the power of property. We had no idea what we were doing. So it was kind of driven by him. But unfortunately, not too long after that, he passed away. So unfortunately, I guess one of the things is it's fantastic in a way that me and my sister, who I work with, have taken one of his passions and kind of made a career out of it. But then at the same time, maybe sad that he didn't get to really see that.
It sounds like it influenced you quite a bit up until that point, from what you've said, even just so far.
I think so. Maybe subconsciously. I think maybe subconsciously. I think there's always been a deep-seated interest in property. From when I used to be a student, used to maybe skip a lecture or two, used to watch Homes Under the Hammer instead. I'm not sure where it ever came from, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came from those early life experiences.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned there legal training. So you've finished your sort of main education. What made you decide to go down the sort of legal route? What was it attracted you to become a lawyer?
Well, I would love to say it was a well thought out career choice, but
other than the money.
Yeah. well, to be honest, I'm not sure I can answer that then, because in my school, there wasn't really a careers officer or anything like that. So when I was about 15, I remember thinking, okay, I want to do a good job and I want to earn decent money. And at that time, this was kind of mid-90s, I'd only heard of two careers where you could do that. One was a doctor and one was a lawyer. I didn't like sick, so I decided that I was going to become a lawyer. And quite worryingly, with hindsight now, I never thought about it again until the day I turned up to start my training contract. I'd never heard of management consultant, investment banker, all of the other corporate careers. I was 14, 15, I knew nothing about them. So I just decided one day, okay, I pick lawyer and
this is my route. This is okay. I think what's interesting, Angus, is that you said you'd already bought your first property when you were early 20s.
Yeah.
You obviously didn't finish your legal training to 25, 26, 27? When do you...
Yeah, so would have finished legal training, let me have a think. So I fully qualified 2007, February 2007.
Okay.
So probably bought our first property maybe 18 months before that.
Okay, so you're already into property, and then you through that career, and then you end up working for the Financial Conduct Authority.
Yeah.
Just explain the role you had there, or how did it come about that you moved in there?
So I trained and qualified at one of the Magic Circle firms in the City of London. I spent 18 months there post-qualification. Took a bit of time out, went travelling. That was extended by the fact that my dad kind of passed away during that time. And then I was then looking at new opportunities to come back into the city because I'd spent a bit of time while he was ill up in the north. Interviewing round, went to the Financial Conduct Authority. To be honest, when I went for the job, I thought it sounded really boring. I nearly didn't go for the interview.
Right.
But yeah, turned up. I was really impressed with the opportunities there, and I spent, probably best part of 10 years working there, working my way up to effectively running a portfolio of enforcement investigations spanning, multiple areas of financial services. So that could be mortgages, insurance, financial advice, client money, up until, the day that I made the decision to step away to just do property full time.
Okay, and it's interesting there you've mentioned a number of different areas that fall under the remit of the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA. So it's probably a good place to start this segment, because I've no doubt there'll be a lot of people wanting to tune into this podcast, particularly to kind of get a sense on what can I do, what can't I do, where are the red lines in the whole area of financial promotions, raising money off private investors, etc. So starting at a really high level, someone comes to you and says, Angus, I want to raise some money for a project. I want to talk to people about what I'm doing. What are the do's and don'ts there? Where are the barriers at a really high level?
So I think there's kind of three areas you've got to be thinking about in general. The first one is financial promotion. So in effect, sales and marketing is kind of a more generic way to put it. The second one, from a property perspective, I would class as joint ventures. From a regulatory perspective, it's collective investment schemes. And then the third is financial advice. So, all of that depends upon, and this is where it gets really kind of circumstance specific. It all depends upon, okay, what have you got? What does it look like? What do you want to happen? Because the way the rules interact are so specific to the circumstances of what you're looking to achieve.
What's interesting there when you say sales and marketing, so the financial promotions, like I'm from a generation that really, if you were going to do any sort of financial promotion, it was like TV, radio, or newspaper, maybe a magazine, maybe a flyer through your door. But that was it. I mean, there wasn't anything outside that really would fall into advertising or looking for investment. How difficult or how more complicated is it now, even for the FCA, that you have social media platforms, you've got podcasts, you've got all these different mediums that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago? And do you find people don't realize just how wide the net is in terms of those financial promotions?
Yeah, look, I think there's a complete lack of awareness of the rules and how they're implemented. And that's nobody's fault, because nobody can be expected to go and, kind of read the FCA handbook, which if you printed it out would, probably stretch, at least 6 foot in the air.
Yeah. Have you read it?
All of it.
Of course you have.
Twice. It's very hard to understand, kind of when you might overstep a line.
Yeah.
Or even where the lines, remotely sit. It's incredibly complicated nowadays, because as you say, generally in those days when there were mediums, the old school mediums, if you like, generally the stuff that was put out on those would be well curated. It would be done by people who, kind of generally worked in the industry and who fully understood the industry.
That's a very good point.
Whereas now, kind of social media allows you to reach a load of people. You don't know who you're reaching, because you don't know who's seeing what. So it's far less, kind of, you have no control of it in that sense. And also, there's a lot of people pushing stuff out there, for a lot of people to see, not really understanding the repercussions of what they might say or do. I mean, if you're gonna kind of take a case in point, you would look at something like the FCA having recently decided to prosecute, I think it's about 9, they call them finfluencers. It's basically like social media celebrities, so it'd be, kind of Geordie Shore cast members, or your Towie cast members and stuff like that, for effectively paid promotion on their social media platforms, which the FCA say breaches their rules. Now, those prosecutions are in train at the minute. But, that is a totally new world that would not have existed a decade ago.
Yeah. Just highlight that again in case viewers and listeners didn't quite grasp that. There are how many? 9 people are currently being prosecuted.
Correct.
In the UK.
Yeah.
For activities that may well breach financial promotions.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many more. This is just kind of the statement case in terms of, FCA messaging in terms of enforcement. The primary focus of it is deterrence. Okay, it's not punishment. Punishment's part of it, but it's deterrence, because they want to send a message out to say to people, someone did this.
Yeah.
This is wrong. Don't you do this.
Okay? Yeah.
So one obvious way to help get the message out is if people with a certain standing in society, a certain amount of influence, a certain amount of followers, do something like that, then it's going to help them get that message out. If they, decide to prosecute that person, as opposed to maybe just Joe Blogs on the street.
So I've seen a stat recently, if my memory serves me right, regarding, I think it was Q3 of 2024, and the FCA indicated that they had written, I think it was just over 5,000 letters, and had sent, I think it was 200 odd alerts regarding activity. Explain what does that mean in terms of alerts, just for a lay person? So if the FCA sends an alert, what relevance is that to, say, someone that might be involved in trying to raise money, for instance, through private investors for a property deal?
So an alert from the FCA perspective is effectively a publication on their website, generally company with a press release, about an individual or a firm or an area of regulation where they think somebody is doing something wrong, and they need to raise awareness in the public that should they come across this person, this company, this particular investment, that they should be very aware of it, and more often than not, that they should stay away from it.
Okay, so let's just unpack that a little bit, and we will want to get back on to just your own journey in property and obviously what you do now so well. But I suppose when people look to book you for a speaking event or a podcast, probably a lot of them are wanting to sort of pick your brain around this whole area of FCA regulation, compliance, and all the rest of it. How is it as simplistic as I sometimes use the example of speeding? So if someone was to, let me reframe that. The frustration I have at times, I'm sure you've had it as well, is that people say, who's going to know what I'm doing? Or who's going to be reading my social media? And there just seems to be this blasé approach very often from, in some cases, quite high-profile people in the world of property training in the UK. I met one recently, and therefore it's wide enough that the podcast recording won't be able to identify. But I met one, and I raised a friends and family because he was training from the front of the room about how you can just keep going to all your friends and family and keep raising money. And I sort of gently pointed out afterwards that actually that isn't allowed anymore. To which he said, well, no one that I know of has ever been caught. And I was like, are you for real? Is that the answer you're going to give me on something like this? So do you find that frustrating that people seem to have a blasé attitude towards it? Or is that just because they don't really understand the importance and the significance of it?
I think it's hard to be frustrated by it because, I think it's very hard to say to anyone, let me rephrase that. It's very hard for people to find out what the rules are. Okay? And even if someone had the drive and the determination and the foresight to find the rules and to read them all, everyone likes to think that rules are black and white. There's a clear line, okay, and this is wrong, this is right. Unfortunately, specifically in this circumstances, so kind of all of these rules were not written with property investment in mind. It's just that over time, you've got to remember, property only became really an investment class maybe in the mid-90s, something like that, mainstream investment class.
That's actually a really good point, Angus. I never thought of it that way before. So the rules that we have that property developers have to adhere to weren't actually written with property investment in mind. That's actually very important.
Yeah. And, they'd be written about, thinking about shares, bonds, things like that. So you've got to apply these rules to a set of circumstances that they weren't written for. Okay. And because of that, there is no black and white. There are shades of grey. And not only are there shades of grey, but those shades of grey apply differently depending on your particular circumstances. What are you trying to do? How are you trying to construct a deal? Your debt, your equity, the number of people involved, how they're involved, the extent of their involvement, passive, active. So it's an incredibly complex area. I think that, the point where you can get frustrated is if, you are aware of this. And then maybe you don't give it the due influence that's necessary. Because, look, let's be honest, there's loads of people out there doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And the chances are that a lot of them won't get caught and prosecuted. But, if you maybe start off and you grow and you become really successful and you do bigger deals and more people get involved in those deals, and then maybe one of those deals goes wrong, okay, then, yeah, it could be the FCA knocking at your door. And there are people who we, kind of are aware of, who've operated in property in the past, who've had brushes with the FCA when they've got to a certain size, when they're doing certain stuff, and people have, kind of turned up to talk to them. So
I'm not going to ask you to name any names, definitely not. But just for the sake of emphasis to our listeners, what you're saying is that of people in the world of property who are out maybe trying to talk to private investors to raise their money, and they've actually bumped into the FCA where they've had a visit and they've had a scrutiny of their
historically, yes. So people, I'll put it broader than just necessarily about money raising. It could be fundraising in general. It could be the way they're dealing with people's money.
Yes, all falling under that. Yes. Okay. Yes, that is exactly I think in some ways the message that needs to go out. I liken it sometimes to speeding. So it's never an issue until you get caught.
The FCA can't investigate, and punish every breach of the regulations. It's about messaging, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
But, they have key priorities. They have areas each year, which are published in their business plan, where they identify key priorities for the year, maybe key areas where they need to get messages out. One of those that has been identified in the last 12 months or so is financial promotions. And those prosecutions of those influencers is one example of how they're looking at that. The data that you talked about is another example of how they're looking at that. The fact is that at the moment, they recognise there's a risk to consumers, the everyday, kind of man or woman on the street, of potentially putting their money in something which isn't suitable or appropriate for that person, and that's an area of focus for them at the minute. And obviously, we know that some of those opportunities involve investment in property.
Yeah. Okay. So you've said something there which has sort of tweaked my memory about what's suitable for investors. So I don't know if you can cast your mind back to that first event with John Corey, Property Fortress, and you were the guest speaker. I think there was definitely was an owner of another crowdfunding platform was there. They asked some questions around scrutiny and the bar being raised for if you like the average retail investor who wants to invest in some cases small amounts of money, £100, £200, and yet there's so many rules they have to follow. The registration on a platform, the AML, the answering of the appropriateness test, like just to invest £100. And I asked a question. I don't know if you remember or not, but at the end I asked a question, slightly cheeky, but it was, why, if Mrs. Smith wants to invest £100 in a crowdfunding platform, that the FCA wants to control whether it's suitable for them or not, and decide what they see or don't see, and yet the same Mrs. Smith can take her whole life savings and bet them on the 255 at Newmarket on a horse she randomly selects out of the newspaper.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, I guess there's two ways to answer that. The first way is the FCA can only regulate what they're asked to regulate by the government. They don't regulate gambling.
That's true.
They regulate, kind of financial services.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to kind of speculate, I would say that if someone goes and bets on a horse race, there's a good chance, unless they're a vulnerable person, that they understand, they can appreciate what's going to happen in the race. They can understand how things win and lose. They can understand that there's a large risk that if their horse doesn't win, they don't get any money back, or if it doesn't, get a place. So it's simpler to understand. It's high risk, but it's simpler to understand. Whereas a lot of financial services stuff, it's a lot more opaque.
Yeah.
It's very hard to understand. It's very hard to appreciate the risks. And obviously with that, there's marketing. Okay, people, yourself. People talk about guaranteed returns all the time. Who's guaranteeing it? Guaranteed by what? Not guaranteed by anything a lot of the time. So I think the lack of transparency and the opaqueness in certain products, and how certain projected returns are arrived at, all of that is very hard for a consumer to understand, and therefore, in that circumstance, they probably need a lot more protection.
That's actually a really good answer, to be fair, a very good answer, because even within the world of crowdfunding, and as you know, I ran a crowdfunding platform for 5 years, and I mean, you have this whole discussion around risk warnings, and human psychology being what it is, the more you see of something, the more you become almost sort of conditioned to it. Yeah. So if you have risk warnings everywhere across every single page, at some point they actually lose their impact, because it's just there, and therefore you're into this arena of you've warned them so much, and yet, as we know, people will still go through all those hoops and loops, all the warnings, sign the appropriateness test, all the rest of it, and if a project doesn't go well, they'll lift the phone and say, "But David, I thought money was safe." And it's like, well, in what world was the money safe? Look at all the risk warnings. Look at all the, conditions to your investment. So I take your point that when someone bets or gambles in that sense, they clearly understand it. Where do you see this going, say, the next 5-10 years in terms of compliance? Because the FCA are small enough. I mean, many people work. In fact, you actually, I think, said to me earlier, your last time in Stratford, or remind you, because you actually worked for the FCA not far from where we're doing the podcast. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So probably left the FCA 6, maybe 7 years ago.
Okay.
So just after they moved from Canary Wharf to Stratford.
Ah, okay. You decided to jump. You decided you love Stratford so much you didn't want to work here. Only joking. Not actually the comment. Don't comment.
It's a lot further from where I live.
Don't comment. So how many staff work for the FCA in its entirety, roughly?
I'd a guess, a couple of thousand.
Yeah, because really, some people think the FCA are like the policemen and women, but they're not really. They're more an investigative. So the crime, in theory, has already happened, and then they're going to become and investigate it. Or there's an early warning a crime may be committed, but they're not out on the streets like the beat trying to prevent crime.
Yeah,
is that fair?
Yeah, because what you've got to remember is there might be a couple of thousand people work there, but their job isn't all enforcement.
Yes,
okay,
so
there might be a couple of hundred people looking at enforcement. The rest are about supervising firms, authorizing firms, conducting reviews on firms. So it's a very small segment in terms of, okay, something's gone wrong, we need to find out what and why, versus actually just the day-to-day helping of firms, understanding problems, risks around firms, in effect trying to manage them from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah. And you've also got, and we'll move on from this and get on to property in a minute in terms of that, but so two comments in terms of one thing that kind of opened my eyes regarding the whole regulatory landscape in the UK was the realization that while the FCA, of course, is an independent organisation, stroke body, there still is quite a large political influence on it. And when we go back to 2020 and what I refer to as the cull of crowdfunding platforms, whenever there'd been some big scandals, London Capital and Finance being one of the bigger ones, you had Dolphin and companies like that, all of a sudden there was this huge scrutiny on bonds being marketed to retail investors, and probably 2/3 of the crowdfunding platforms in the UK just were literally gone overnight, having had their license revoked. And you're kind of thinking, well, that's pretty. Is that taking a stick, a sledgehammer to crack a nut per se? And then what was explained to me going forward from actually a mutual friend who's also in the legal side of things is you had people who lost their money. They go to local MP complaining. The MP then obviously ends up going to the Treasury, giving off about all these schemes out here. They're taking people's pension money. The Treasury then goes to the FCA and demands more action, and then the FCA take action. Then you have all the crowdfunding companies who lost their businesses going to their MPs and saying, we've lost our livelihood, we've lost our employees, and then that almost feeds it back to the FCA again through the Treasury saying, you maybe overreacted there a little bit. Can we find a better way forward on this? Are you conscious of that kind of political sphere that sometimes impacts what the FCA does, like on the ground in property investment?
Yeah, I mean 100%. There is certain political pressures to look at certain stuff. If it's impacting, a certain segment of society, if people are vulnerable, if there's a lot of press coverage, there is definitely a sense of that, because although the FCA is kind of quasi-independent in terms of it's funded by the firms it regulates, ultimately it's still its statutory objectives are set by the government, still answerable to the government for all the statutory objectives. So it's a difficult line to tread. I suppose when you look at it that way, the government interests and kind of the people's interests might be aligned in some circumstances in terms of there's a public scandal that people are worried about, people are getting affected, the FCA needs to get a message out there. But like you say, I think sometimes, there's definitely political pressures at play in certain investigations.
Yeah, it's just the law of the jungle in terms of that. Okay, last question on this, and then we'll move on. I certainly have people would say to me sometimes the whole FCA and the bringing in all these rules to stop retail investors even being able to see the sort of investments that high net worth and sophisticated investors get to see is actually just a smoke screen, if you like, to keep the good investments away from the little man. i.e. the high net worths know where all the good investments are. They make the big returns, and the idea that a government should even like decide what a smaller investor should and shouldn't see doesn't sit well with some people. Just the point of view of, well, it's my money, I've earned it. Why should the government tell me what I can't and can't see and what I can't and can't invest in? Any sympathy for that, or is it better to be protective of the market as a whole?
I think it's a fundamental question, isn't it? It's free market versus, kind of consumer protection. I can understand both sides of the story. I don't think the current system for getting the balance is perfect, but no one's come up with anything better. And to all of those people, kind of my challenge would always be, okay, well, what's your proposal? Because I absolutely do think that, people should be given more freedom to choose what they put it in. But I also think there's an obligation to somehow, and it's very difficult to identify and protect maybe people who you might class as vulnerable, who perhaps won't make the best decision, who might just put their life savings into something because they've read it's a 10% guaranteed return. But actually, in fact, it looked like a good deal. Markets changed. It wasn't guaranteed. And now they've lost everything. So I think it's a very difficult balance to strike.
Yeah. No, I think you've put that across well, just in terms of the competing factors in that, Okay, let's move on from the heavy stuff, move on from the FCA stuff. So you obviously do a lot of speaking as well, not just about the FCA and compliance. You're obviously very successful in your own right in terms of what you've done in buy-to-lets. And I know you've also been in the education space quite a bit, so you're a really well-known trainer. You've got a very relaxed style, no hype, tell it as it is, get results type mentorship, I guess you'd call it. So explain your current model. So what do you do in property, and why have you chosen that strategy as opposed to something different?
So what we do in property now, what I would say is we do a bit of everything, and we have done a bit of everything, apart from I don't do rent to rent and I don't do land development. That's just not my thing. They never have been, they never will be. That being said, I do see a lot of people kind of scattergunning all over the place. So they're looking at an HMO deal in Stoke, and then they're analysing a commercial to residential deal in Basingstoke. And that's where I think, a lack of depth of knowledge leads to mistakes, which leads to losing money. When we started out investing, what I would say with clarity and with a plan, which probably kicked in around about 2013, I would say, we started just buying buy-to-lets in one town in the northeast. Okay. And then what we did is we built our investments out like a jigsaw. So once we got comfortable with that, we bolted on another town, and then another town, and then did a different strategy in the towns we're existing in. And then so we just kind of built out the jigsaw and layered up the jigsaw, but only moving on once we were able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, I've got this now, I feel comfortable with this, I can repeat this strategy. Then there's room to learn something else, because you'll know yourself the depth of knowledge you need to understand something in to make a solid, safe investment. You can't do that with an hour or so's worth of training, a couple of hours worth of training. You've really got to master your craft. Yeah, and you can't. It's really hard to master 10 crafts at once. Yeah,
no, that's a really, really good point. I mean, we've discussed this before. Obviously, it cracks me up when I meet people who have spent tens of thousands of pounds in some cases on multiple different courses, all of which are like a strategy in their own right. And you talk to them about their courses, and they've loved the courses, they've loved the training and mentors, had a great time. And then you say, well, how many properties do you have? Oh, I haven't bought my first one yet. It's like, well, why would you be looking at all these detailed, creative strategies and you haven't even jumped in the water yet and started to swim? So I think, there can be sometimes an overselling of courses and mentorship, and it's beyond where people are at in their own property journey.
Yeah, and I think, look, I haven't got there quick. It's taken me 20 years to do what I've done. So, the people who do it far quicker than I've done, but slow and steady, I'm happy with. But I think you're right. There's a difference between education and implementation. Okay, I've worked for a number of the property education companies now. I just do stuff kind of privately on a one-to-one basis. But from my perspective, you can go and you can have a fantastic education product, but an education product can only take you so far because it can only deal with a certain number of scenarios. Okay. And you might come off an education course, you're an experienced investor yourself, but let's assume you come off a buy-to-let course. You've done the course. You walk in to view your first property. You come out. I guarantee you've got 15 questions that weren't answered on that course because you can't. They're so property specific.
Correct.
So a lot of people, I think, need help with actually implementation of the education. And that's something which kind of I've specialized in more in terms of, okay, you've got a basic understanding, but actually how do you implement that in practice successfully?
Yeah.
Slimming it down. Sometimes it's about slimming down what's in people's brains to what they need to know and giving them a clear order and structure as to, okay, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to do this and then we need to do this. Then come back, let's discuss the answers. And then we'll decide, okay, is it worth moving on to questions C and D? But if we haven't got the right answers to questions A and B, then we leave it because guess what? It's not for us. It's not right for you based on the objectives that you set, the business metrics and the KPIs that we've discussed about what makes a good investment for you. Doesn't hit them, we move on.
Yeah, I think what you've said there is really important. I think that's why you're, very sought after in that sector. And from talking to some of the people you have trained, exactly that. You go at the pace of the mentee. You don't just have this material that you just regurgitate. And it doesn't matter whether they pick it up or not. The way a lot of courses are run, it's like bums on seats. I'll deliver the material. Whoever takes it up and runs with it, it's up to them. I've delivered the material. You flip out on its head, and there's no point in going to, as you said, C and D if you haven't actually mastered A and B.
Yeah,
which ultimately is more valuable to the person who's paying the money for the mentorship.
So I think kind of you've got to having an education product is like squeezing a square peg in a round hole. Okay, because it's not thinking about what that person needs based on where they are, their particular circumstances, the capital they've got available, the time they've got available, their particular strengths and weaknesses. The best that anyone can do, I think, is if they have a tailored product to what they're looking to achieve. And that's what I try and do. I would try and sit with someone for a period of time, have a call with them, really understand where they are, where they want to be, understand the position they're in, and then work out, kind of, number one, if I'm the right person for them, sometimes I'm not, if they're the right person for me, and then, reflect to them, okay, well, this is where I think you are, this is where I think you need, how I see you moving forward is this, and see what they think about that. And if that works for them, then, we can move forward in that sense. But I think to get the value out of it, it has to be personal.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. Okay, so what do you like about the buy-to-let strategy that you do? I started out in 2000 doing buy-to-lets. Myself and a couple of friends got together. We purchased 23 properties in 18 months, like back in what we'd call the good old days. The most expensive property, Angus, was £38,000 back in early 2000s. The guy with the money panicked in 2002 because he thought the market had reached its peak. 2002.
Yeah, could have held on a little bit, just a little bit longer.
Yeah, very, very frustrating. But the point being, I think I've bought and sold about 100 buy-to-lets between Northern Ireland and Scotland. But for me, it was kind of like, I kind of want to know what's next, what's bigger, what's better. And yet, I love when I'm talking to you that you're just, this is what I do. I'm an expert at it, 20 years experience at it. And you're like, fulfilled, if that's the right word. You can reach your property goals by the strategy you employ. So what is it about your current strategy that you enjoy the most?
Well, look, like I say, we do a lot of different strategies: buy-to-let, HMOs, serviced accommodation, social housing. But if I had to pick a favourite, I like buy-to-let. Now, maybe that's because I'm simple, David, and I don't constantly need to feel challenged.
Says the FCA enforcement officer who's a lawyer.
Yeah. So, but I think from my perspective, I love buy-to-lets for a number of reasons, because I like doing a deal. I like, finding a deal, doing a deal. I can't build an IKEA cabinet with these hands. I'm useless with DIY. I'm slightly colourblind, so I can't do interiors. So I don't enjoy the bit after it, the renovations, making it look pretty. That's not my thing. I like doing a deal. So any kind of property strategy can fulfill that itch. What I like about buy-to-lets in particular is the fact that probably if I look at the financial analysis of my portfolio, which I spend a lot of time on, probably not a lot of people do, buy-to-lets have probably historically outperformed my expectations of when I bought that property. Whereas a number of other strategies, I would say, have probably slightly underperformed my expectations. So I like it for that reason. And, just the longevity of, kind of seeing those properties go up in value, making good homes for people, because I think you do get fulfillment from people making it their home. And a lot of my properties are, kind of rented to people who probably will never buy. So they do want to make it their home. And they do want to make it a permanent base for them. And, in a lot of circumstances, their mum lives over the road, their sister lives around the corner, their kids go to the local school. So there is that sense of care, which I like from that strategy.
Okay. And so someone comes along to you and says, Angus, I've got this plot of land. We've got planning passed on it. It's an absolute no-brainer. We're building 5 houses. Here's the GDV. Here's the construction cost. I've allowed a wee bit of room there for contingency. This is a no-brainer. We're going to build 5 houses. That just doesn't. Well, what is it about that you'd say, no, thank you. I'm going to stick with this. What's the thought process?
So first of all, it would be a lack of knowledge because it's not my area. So it's not my area. I'm not going to get involved in it. But I think from my perspective, I don't like the risks around developments like that, and I don't like the time because there's so many risks that you can't control. Okay, build costs because of the spans of time. Build costs can change massively. GDVs can change massively. Market conditions. There's so many things that can change. Whereas the deals I do, I'm normally in and out in 6 months. So there's far less time for that to happen. And, I get the fact that they can have fantastic margin. There's some great people doing some fantastic things in that space. But for me, sometimes I'll speak to people and they say, well, I bought this plot of land in 2020 and we're just coming to the end of it now in 2024 and I've built these 8 houses and they're fantastic. And I kind of sit there and think, yeah, but I can just buy, with my experience and connections, I can buy 8 houses a year. But it's taken you 4 years to build them 8 houses. I can just buy existing properties and make money from them quicker and with less complexity and hassle, in my view, versus that.
Yeah, I think that's a strong argument. The lack of complexity is huge because people sit in rooms, and I've been there myself, doing overseas property. It's great on a page, it's great on a PowerPoint presentation, but start getting in with local planners in another jurisdiction across Europe, start getting into all the political nuances of the local mayor and them knowing or not knowing the local planner. The level of complexity and complication is just insane. The bigger the project gets.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kind of, and I like to keep it simple. And I think as well the speed of transaction I like, because I don't want to just be finding 1 or 2 sites a year. I want to be finding a dozen or 20 deals a year, because if that's the bit that I get the little kick out of, and it's just a little kick and then you're like on to the next one, then I need that a bit more often.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Funding. This is the property funding podcast, as you know. So how do you go about deciding on the funding sources? I'm guessing for most of your buy-to-lets, there's going to be some senior debt involved, a pretty mainstream buy-to-let option. In terms of the extra money you need, either to purchase or refurb, where does that come from? What is your thought process around your funding sources?
So I think when we were starting out and expanding, that came initially from us. But obviously, it doesn't matter whether you start with £1 or £100,000 or £500,000. If you buy multiple properties, everybody runs out of funds until they kind of become a bit more self-sustaining. So yes, we did get kind of back in the day, kind of some third-party debt involved to help us do some of our projects. Nowadays, we're a little bit more self-sustaining. So kind of most of our funding will come from probably 1 or 3 sources. So it'll come from senior debt in terms of bridging finance, senior debt in terms of mortgage finance for purchases, or we do tend to work with investors. Typically, what that will look like and how we prefer to operate is we have some good long-term relationships with investors. So they will typically fund at least 100% of purchase, for fixed return, but with first charge.
Okay, so sort of debt as opposed to equity then?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is a great way to replace the bank lending, particularly when, I don't know how you structure your deals per se, but the way I would normally do that or be involved in that is you don't have the same fees you would have with, say, going to a bridger, where it's fees here, fees there, redemption fees, hidden fees, and all of that. It's a bit more straightforward loan document and whatever the interest rate is without some of the extra hassle around it.
Yeah, correct. It tends to be quicker, tends to be more flexible.
Yeah.
If you think about when you look at bridging finance nowadays, when you add the fees on top, you're probably looking at least 15% annualized. So if you think about if you offer up to 15% to someone, or any less than 50%, you're effectively
up.
You're effectively up.
Yep.
And if you get speed and flexibility around that, then great.
Yeah. Okay. And if you could source, say, 10 times the money you have now access to, could you do a lot more business, or is it a case of the business that you want to do and can do, you do have the money for it?
Yeah. So we are pretty strict in terms of our criteria. Obviously, what I'm big thing about is our criteria change depending on the market. You can't just have the same criteria. You've got to flex to market conditions. So we are pretty strict in terms of what we buy. So, I always worry about the people who I see buying 20, 30, 40, 50 deals a year, because I'm looking at that thinking, I'm not sure, is there an error in your spreadsheet? So I don't think so, because I'd rather buy less good deals, than lots of average deals. So, could we do more? Yes. Would we have to really carefully model that out to make sure that we could service all the obligations that we have? Yes, because I think that's a major risk that a lot of people don't necessarily fully think about.
I think you're absolutely right.
But am I desperate to do, loads more volume? Probably not. If we can do anywhere between half a dozen and a dozen deals a year, that's brilliant.
You're happy. Yeah. You mentioned there, and I forgot to ask earlier, you've kind of said we, ourselves, us. Is that who's the we, who's the us in that?
Yeah, so everything I do with my sister. So we started off investing in 2005 together. We still talk to each other 20 years later. I don't know why, but yeah, our portfolio is probably something north of 100 units now. We've built that up together. Everything we own is 50-50. My sister also heads up a regulated sourcing company, finding stuff for people in the Northeast. Which we also run together, although she takes the day-to-day lead on that.
Okay. And who manages? Do you manage the property sort of in-house, or do you outsource that to a management agent?
So I think I'm a bit different from most people. So I made the decision really early on that I didn't want a lot of staff. In fact, I wanted the least staff humanly possible, because otherwise I was just creating myself a job as people manager.
Yes.
And that's just like any other job. I could have stayed in my legal job and done that. That was effectively kind of a lot of my day-to-day job. Whereby I didn't want to tie myself down to that. So we have kind of two people who work for us. One's a PA, one's a bookkeeper. We do have a number of people who help us view properties, but apart from that, we outsource everything. Now, it's not perfect because I've still got to manage the managers.
Yeah.
But what that means is there's an additional layer of management in there.
Yeah.
Which hopefully means less gets to me.
Yes, and they are being paid to take the responsibility for delivering that service.
Correct.
Which in some ways is the weight off your mind, providing they do their job, which you have to check in to make sure. So myself and my wife actually used to run a letting and management agent for a while back in the early 2000s, and couldn't wait to give it up. That was a tough gig, I can tell you, a tough gig.
It's funny, I've got a number of friends who ran letting agents, and none of them ever wished they'd opened them in the first place. Because what always scared me is, it's fine if you can have huge multiple staff and that's your thing. But if you employ one or two members of staff and they leave
Yeah,
or they get sick.
it's
It's your job again for 6 months
Yeah,
until you can find someone to
absolutely,
train them up.
absolutely. And just the very nature of it is, it's just problems from start to finish. The office opens in the morning till it closes at night. You're just dealing with problems. But by and large, that's just the nature of the beast. Now, there's obviously a good business there because you're taking it off the likes of you. And a client, you said you've over 100 in your portfolio. That's a good business model if someone can mentally deal with all the hassle that goes with it. So it's horses for courses, but it's certainly not for me, for sure.
Exactly. And the thing is, it would even be a very hard thing to bring in house because that is spread across a number of strategies. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a very different skill set to manage a buy-to-let to manage the serviced accommodation unit. So that's two very different sets of staff. And again, HMOs is a bit different in and of itself. So you can't, I don't think, look at it as a mass and say it's in-house because in effect, there's specialist sub-branches within each one, which needs staff with different skills to actually operate effectively.
Yeah, okay. So just finishing off then, a couple of wee quick ones to finish. Lessons learnt. So what advice would you give, or what, shouldn't use the word advice talking to an ex-FCA enforcement officer, what tips, what lessons would you give someone just starting out, sitting in front of you, they want to get into property, into buy-to-let? Any quick high-level tips you would give?
Yeah, so look, I think there's loads of low-cost education products out there, books, podcasts like this one, YouTube videos, where you can get an understanding of the basic concepts to really help catapult you on your way. So I think that's a good starting point. I think getting to, networker meetings and surrounding yourself with, people who've done it, being able to pick their brains is another fantastic way. When I was starting out, I remember I used to go to this one networker meeting every month, and my job every month was to get myself stuck. And I would go to the guy who was the presenter of the meeting, and every month I would queue up, I would ask him a question. That question would hopefully allow me to move forward, and then my job was to get myself stuck for the next month, go back, ask another question. So I think, there's some relatively low-cost ways to get started. I think it's important to make sure that, you buy your first property. You've got to get started. Your first property might not always be, your best deal. And I am obviously going to say, because I did it as well, to get someone to hold your hand. I think, there's so many pitfalls out there, but I think to just get started, because there's a huge mindset difference between 0 properties and 1 property. Okay. Because if you can prove the model to yourself and prove, and have confidence in the model that you've heard about, but you haven't really seen it until you've done it, and then you've done it. I think it moves things massively, and it makes it so much easier for you to move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Crystal ball. So fast forward 10 years. What is Angus Griffin doing in 10 years' time, and where is he in his property journey?
Do you know what? I think it's difficult. He's probably been to Turkey for a hair transplant by then, or something like that. No, I think what you see, I love property. Okay, I'm the kind of person, and I'm not sure I should say this on a podcast, who hides in the toilet from my wife because she's told me to stop looking on Rightmove. I haven't quite finished, so I'm sitting there scrolling. So I genuinely love property. So property's done so much for me. It's not like I'm desperate to achieve something else or try a new strategy or, do a £1 million deal or anything like that. Property's done fantastic things for me. I do want to keep buying, I want to keep enjoying it. I think, I can't ever see myself stopping. I think, I'll just keep doing what I do because I love it. Look, there might come a scenario when I wake up one day and enough's enough, but, I think what I'm going to be doing is keeping adding to the portfolio, because I see my portfolio, my main driver for investing is a legacy for my son, because I think there's enough for everybody to worry about in the world, and I'm not going to give him everything, and I'm not going to make it easy for him. Yeah. But if you can take a pressure, like a financial pressure away, so it's one thing you always know that he won't have to worry about. Okay, when there's likely to be so much else going on. Yeah. That's important for me. Yeah.
No, I think the way you've answered that really is a summary of Angus Griffin to me in many ways. Often I ask that question, and there's no right and wrong, every individual's, but so many are aiming for the big house, aiming for the lifestyle, aiming for, in 10 years' time, I would almost like want to build another Burj Khalifa, which is great to have those visions. But you were just like, 10 years' time, you're going around your target area looking for your property, and you're happy.
Give me them 3-bed ex-council semis in the northeast. I'm happy with that. I don't need a Burj Khalifa. Do you know what I mean?
I love that. I love that. But it's I know for you it's genuine, and that again, I think in a world of hype, we have so much in the world of property. I think it's refreshing to have someone just literally say that and mean it. That actually, here's the bread and butter of property. Yeah, there's things you can do and exciting projects, and of course, hero projects are brilliant as well. I've been in the Burj Khalifa a couple of times. I was sent by a client to go and try and buy an apartment. You're looking at sort of floor 76, looking down onto the fountains. Wow. I mean, phenomenal experience. But again, would you want to really be in, set that as your target? It didn't float my boat necessarily. So I love just the basics, the bread and butter of property. And at the end of the day, with a lot more of that type of houses in the UK and the world than there are of the biggies. So I think that's excellent. I'll give you one last sentence. Anything you can think of? Anything you want to comment on? Or
no? Do you know what? For me, I would just say to people: look, if you're watching this and you get stuck, I'm on at Angus Griffin Property at Instagram. I don't mind if anyone ever drops me a message, no matter what they're thinking about. I'll always try and help them out. I'm not, I'm not a salesman. I haven't got a sales bone in my body. I wish I did. Kind of. I think being a lawyer's sat me too much just on the fence. Honest. Yeah. So. If anyone's ever stuck with anything, I'm always happy to have a quick chat, and if I can help them move forward in the same way that person, when I went to that networker meeting every month, did it for me, then brilliant.
Absolutely fantastic, and I'm definitely going to take you up on a wee visit to Sunderland.
Yeah,
Stadium of Light.
Yeah, we'll get you the right shirt and everything like that. So
I'll definitely not wear a Newcastle shirt. Don't worry.
You won't come out alive.
I was going to say that would never go. No, I don't support Newcastle. Just I know the rivalry up there, but no, absolutely fantastic. Listen, absolute pleasure. I'll give you a handshake there. Brilliant. Glad to have you on, and no doubt we'll see each other at a networking event somewhere near you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Thank you.